I was reading a story this week about a guy who was trying to climb Everest. As you know, there's quite a lot of people every year try and make the summit. It's a very expensive thing. It's a very difficult thing. There's a number of camps that you sort of have to go through to get acclimatized and get up all the way that high. And as you get near the top, there's these people called Sherpas who help you kind of do this thing. And I was reading about one this week, just as they were trying to do the last bit, which isn't short by any means, but the last bit, this Sherpa was accompanying a Chinese climber up, and they came across in the dark a Malaysian climber who seemed to have got separated. He was alone. It was the middle of the night, so it's dark. And this guy, he's all got all the kit on and all the clobber on, but he's just clinging to this rope, and you can see him shivering, and he's in real danger. He's probably got hours, just maybe a couple of hours to live. And at this point, the Sherpa's got a decision. Does he and the climber, do they keep going for their own summit attempt, or do they rescue this guy who's in a desperate state? And of course, the right thing to do was they stopped and they rescued. And this Sherpa, the only way they could get this guy down from kind of the uppermost part of the climb was they had to kind of basically wrap him up. And this Sherpa had to put this guy on his back and had to carry him on his back 6 hours back down to the next sort of camp down. The Sherpa afterwards said, "It's the hardest thing I've ever had to do." 6 hours. If someone said, could I carry Tom on my back, I could probably I don't think I'd get to the end of the car park. 6 hours down in the ice and the snow to save this guy's life, which is what he did. He saved his life. But he said it was the hardest thing I've ever had to do. But the guy was in a desperate state. Like he's in such danger, he's in such peril. I had to do it. Had to get involved. Had to try and help him. That's really what we're thinking about. Tom's start to help us think about it. We're going to think about this morning. This question I think Paul is trying to help his readers understand is, well, how do we look after each other spiritually? How do we watch out for danger for one another spiritually speaking? Like, how do we do that? And what I want to do this morning is something slightly unusual from what I'd normally do. I'm not going to try and preach the whole passage that we had read. I actually want us to look at just one verse this morning. And I want us just to kind of dig into it and work through it to think about this question of how we look out for one another spiritually. And the only verse I want us to look at this morning is verse 1 of chapter 6, where it says this: "Brothers and sisters, if someone is caught in a sin, you who live by the Spirit should restore that person gently." So I'm going to use 4 questions to help us just work out how do we do this thing that Paul is talking about here. So here's the first question. What is it that we are watching out for? If we're to look out for each other, if we're to watch out for one another spiritually speaking, well, what are we looking for? Well, Paul tells us, brothers and sisters, if someone is caught in a sin, Okay, so I don't think Paul is saying we need to sort of intervene in each other's lives for each and every sin that might happen. You know, it's not like, well, you sent me an email and it was a bit terse, so I think we need an intervention. It's not like you forgot to show up for a rota this week, so a couple of elders are going to come and visit you. Paul says, if someone is caught, the word he uses has the sense of if someone's been overtaken and almost sort of ensnared and captured. Maybe it's the image of if someone has been sort of taken out to sea and they're caught in the current and they're adrift and they're in real danger. Or maybe it is the image of the climber who's sort of walked off the path and they've got themselves lost. And it's a dangerous situation. They're ensnared in something. They've been taken hold of something. Maybe if you're a Harry Potter fan, it's wandering into the forbidden forest and finding ourselves in all sorts of danger. Maybe, boys and girls, have you ever done one of those kind of hedge mazes? Anyone ever done one of those? You've been to a place where they've got a maze, and you go in and you run around pretty quickly. You can feel quite lost, can't you? If you've ever done this, you may have had this sense of a slight mild panic as you think, actually, what if I never get out of here? What if I can never find my way? I think that's the image that Paul is using. This sense of someone being caught, overtaken, ensnared, lost, adrift. Now, what sort of things might that be? It could be any number of things, couldn't it? It could be a relationship that somebody has got into, which is sort of dragging them away unhelpfully from their faith. It could be a breakdown in a relationship, couldn't it? It could be sort of a difficulty that happens. That means we try and avoid people, and maybe it's easier just to kind of stop going to a small group or stop going to church altogether because we don't want to see that person. It's difficult. There's a breakdown that can cause these things. Maybe it's the circumstances of life, a particular burden, as we were being described, maybe one of those particularly difficult burdens which can really kind of throw us off and leave us feeling a bit lost and adrift, and we need someone to come and get us. Maybe it's just the pulls of the world. Maybe it's the pull of career, or just the demands of the job which kind of suck us in, and pretty quickly they start to draw us away from other commitments, draw us away from the Lord, draw us away from church and fellowship, and so on. As I describe that, is there anyone in your mind? Is there anyone that springs to mind that you think, actually, yeah, I can think of someone who I think is caught and adrift, and maybe a bit lost, and maybe a bit in danger? Is there someone in your mind? Let's stop. Let's stop for 30 seconds to pray for that person now. Just 30 seconds of silence, just for you to pray for whoever the Lord has just placed onto your heart. Father, we do pray for those on our hearts whom we dearly love, who seem to be caught or a bit lost. Help us to work out how it is that we can reach out and restore. Amen. Second question then, what are we watching for? We're watching for someone who's got themselves caught or overtaken. Who should respond? If we see that happening to someone we know and love, well, who is it that's meant to do something? Who's meant to respond? Who's the first responder in that situation? Well, Paul tells us, doesn't he? He says, brothers and sisters, if someone is caught in a sin, you who live by the Spirit should restore that person. You who live by the Spirit. Maybe if you've got another translation, the older version of this used to say, you who are spiritual, which for many of us kind of gets us off the hook, doesn't it? Because we think, well, I'm not very spiritual, so that's not me. No, Paul says, you who live by the Spirit. Now, remember what Paul has been saying over the last chapter. He said to the Galatians in 5:16, I say walk by the Spirit. Verse 18, if you are led by the Spirit. Verse 25, since we live by the Spirit. In other words, Paul is saying, if you're a Christian, you who live by the Spirit are Christians. So who should respond? You should. You ever had that experience of phoning up customer services with a problem, and you phone the number, and you finally, after waiting forever, get through to somebody, and you explain the problem. They say, "Oh no, I'm sorry. That's you need to talk to someone else. Let me put you through." You go through the cycle again, and you get to speak to someone else. Say, "Oh no, we really can't help with that. That's this person over here. You need to call this number." And you feel like you get put around the houses, don't you? Because what's happening? They don't really want to deal with it. They don't want to respond. Do you remember right back in the very beginning of the Bible in Genesis chapter 4 when Cain kills his brother Abel? And God comes and finds Cain. He says, where is your brother Abel? And Cain answers, am I my brother's keeper? Which I think the implied answer is, yes. Yes, you are. Who should respond? Well, actually, we should. We shouldn't just sort of turn a blind eye and just hope it sort of goes away or sorts itself out or somebody else deals with it. We shouldn't sort of just start gossiping amongst each other and saying, have you heard about so-and-so? Do you know what they've got themselves into? Isn't that awful? Isn't that terrible? And I'm just sharing this for prayer, but I really want to tell someone. No, we shouldn't do that. Interestingly, you shouldn't first go to a church leader. That's interesting, isn't it? You might see it and think, I need to go and tell a church leader. No. Now, you might need to do that. We'll come back to that. It might get there. The first thing is you go. If you see someone, if you know someone caught in a dangerous thing, overtaken in sin, you need to go to them. You need to go and speak to them. You need to go and have, and we'll come back to how you do this, but a gentle and loving conversation about your worry for them. We each need, all of us, to do this, don't we, as Tom was helping us see. Now, I need, like Tom, I need 3 volunteers to help me this morning. Yes, come on then, let's have Isla. Let's have, come on, Lydia. And anyone else not been out yet, want to go? Go on then, Ro. Come on. Come out. Now, you guys, come down here. Come down the front. It's just going to be safe to do this down here, trust me. Should have done a risk assessment, but, there it is. Okay. So, here's what we've got. Length of rope, okay? Stretch it out for me, Ro. Go on, take it away. Now, we're going to have a little, you 3 versus me, we're going to have a little tug of war, okay? How do you feel about that? Do you think you can win? You think you do? You feel pretty confident, okay? Now, we've got to be careful because you've got a wall behind you. Maybe come this way a little bit. Just come this way a little bit. Okay, so I'll say go. Pretty quickly, I'm going to say stop because I don't think this is going to go well for me, okay? So, so are you ready? Okay. 3, 2, 1, go. God, oh, no. Okay, stop. Right, I'm blaming my shoes. I've got slippy shoes. Right, okay, come back. Yeah. It's just the shoes. That's all that's going on here. Right, Simon and Tom, come on. I'm going to get some help here. Yeah. Right. Okay, that's it. He's got to wrap around him. This is serious business. Right, are you ready? 3, 2, 1, go. Come on. Oh, yeah. Easy. Okay, there you go. You can stop. You can put it down. Round of applause. There you go. Well done. Now, what was the point of that, apart from embarrassing children and myself? What's the point, boys and girls? You see that? You see what Tom did earlier with, needing people? See what happened there? What's the point? We need each other, don't we? Actually, we need each other. The Christian life, and adults, we need to know this too, don't we? It's not designed to be something we do alone. It's not to be designed to be sort of this solo race with you against other people. It's not this kind of personal pilgrimage that's it's just me and God. Everything in the Bible tells us this is what we have to do together. I desperately need one. I desperately need you to help me. Because on my own, it's not going to take much, is it? It's not going to take much. We need one another. This is why Paul says to the church, look, if you see someone, move toward it. If you see them, you respond. You act. Here's the third question. What should they do? So if you see someone caught in a sin, you think, okay, I think I need to try and help. What exactly are we meant to do? Well, we see in the passage, don't we, in that verse, brothers and sisters, if someone is caught in a sin, you who live by the Spirit should restore that person. That's the aim. The aim is to restore. The aim is not to wound. The aim is not to go and just give them a good telling off. The aim is not to go and be somewhat sort of superior. No, the aim is restoration. The thing that we're desperately praying for and hoping for as we go and talk to people who have been caught in something dangerous is say, look, I'm here because I want to see you restored. The word restore here has a couple of meanings. We see it once in the beginning of Mark's Gospel where it's used of the disciples mending nets. We're told the fishermen were sat together, they were mending nets. So that's one way of thinking about the imagery. Is like sitting alongside each other, mending. It's a nice image because it means I come and sit beside you. I'm not superior to you. I'm not better than you. I'm alongside you, helping to mend. The other interesting usage of this is it's a medical usage, which means to sort of set a bone that has been fractured or dislocated. Boys and girls, have you ever broken a bone? Anyone broken a bone? Yeah. Have any of you had to have surgery on that? It's a bit more unusual, isn't it? But yes, sometimes you had to have an operation because it had to be put right, didn't it? You couldn't just leave it. That's sort of the image. It's an interesting image to describe sin, isn't it? Because it tells us that sin is dislocation. Sin is not just it's not just like a splint that needs removing, is it? It's not just yes, it's a little thing. We'll just get some tweezers, we'll pull it out. No, it tells us actually it's quite a serious thing. It's a serious thing. I remember working in A&E many years ago, and a lad came in who had dislocated his kneecap coming off a mountain bike, and his kneecap was sort of on the side, not on the front. And there was a lot of groaning and moaning, but the doctors came in, people with skill and calm demeanour, and the gas and air, and there was a bit of a kind of a shove and but then it's all back, and it's fixed. It tells us, that image of dislocation tells us that it's a serious thing. It tells us that actually treatment's painful. It's painful both to go toward it and to receive it, isn't it? This whole thing of restoring people caught in sin, that's a painful thing. That's not an easy thing. That will be hard. It will be a difficult thing to move towards. It'll be a difficult thing when someone comes to us and we have to be on the receiving end of someone challenging us. But, thirdly, it tells that inaction is unthinkable. Because what happens if you've got a dislocation or a fracture and you don't do anything about it? That can lead to permanent disfigurement, can't it? Somebody can walk with a limp for the rest of their life because they never got something sorted. See, inaction is utterly unthinkable. We cannot just sit by and do nothing and hope it sort of works itself out. It's dislocated. It's fractured. It needs intervention. It needs action. How do you do this? Very practically, if you've got a Bible, turn back to Matthew chapter 18. Jesus actually gives us a sort of a process for these sorts of difficult situations, which we're sometimes called to. And here it is, Matthew 18. Jesus says this. This is verses 15 to 17. Here's the process. If your brother or sister sins, go and point out their fault just between the two of you. That's stage one. It's just the two of you. It's not. Don't gossip about it. Don't ignore it. Don't take a squad of people. It's just the two of you. You go. You talk about it. Just the two of you. Hopefully it's sorted there. If they listen to you, you've won them over. That's the aim. Get it done. Stage one. Sometimes it doesn't work. Verse 16. If they will not listen, then you have to take one or two others along. Now, this might be close friends. This might be people who know the situation. This might be the church leader has to be sort of brought in and involved. And what are you doing? Well, the two of you go so that every matter may be established by the testimony of two or three witnesses. You're trying to look, what's actually going on here? What's the issue? How do we address it? How do we see it? How do we understand it? How do we respond to it? It's becoming more serious. And we're hoping that the increased sort of seriousness wakes the person up. Verse 17, if that doesn't work, stage 3, if they still refuse to listen, you have to tell it to the church. So sometimes things get so serious, sort of drawn out. All this takes time, by the way. This isn't sort of a matter of a few days. But if you've tried and you've talked and they're just not listening, and then a couple of you tried and they're still not listening, at some point, sometimes the church has to be told. And those in the church who know the person, well, they're to pray for them, and they're to keep reaching out, and they're to keep making every effort to restore them, not judgmentally or harshly, but gently, as we'll see. They have to keep doing that. And if that doesn't work, if they persist in this way, you've said, I think you're caught in a sin, I think you're ensnared, you're lost, you're adrift. If they keep going, refusing to listen, at some point, Jesus says you have to treat them as a pagan or a tax collector. What does he mean by that? How do you treat a pagan or a tax collector? You pray for their salvation. Because their life has got to such a point where how they're living really puts a great big question mark over the credibility of their profession of faith. And you start to pray that they would, in fact, be saved. There's a process there that Jesus gives. First one-to-one, maybe one or two others. Maybe it's got to get to the church. But there's the process. That's what we do as we seek to restore. And then final question. is this one there. How? How should you do it? Well, Paul tells us, if someone is caught in a sin, you who live by the Spirit should restore that person gently. Gently is really the key words. Sadly, sometimes the often forgotten word in these sorts of processes when they happen in church life. How does Jesus deal with us? Gently. When we fall, when we fail again and again, how does he deal with us? He's gentle and he's lowly. How are we to be with one another? We're to be gentle. The writer, the theologian Donald Guthrie said this: it's the unexpected occasions when Christians fall which are most difficult to deal with and which tend to call forth harsh criticism from fellow believers. Maybe a temptation to think, well, it serves them right. Or to think, well, that sort of thing would never happen to me. No, we must be gentle. We must be incredibly gentle with each other as we have these sorts of painful and difficult conversations. You know, don't you, if you've been to a GP or a doctor, you know, some have a good bedside manner. Some, they're already writing the prescription before you get through the door. Some listen and they're interested. Some not so much. I had to have a little bit of minor surgery earlier this year. I had to have a little mole sort of cut out, and I went to see my GP, and he said, yeah, I think we'll just refer that to the dermatologist. And I went to see the dermatologist and said, yeah, I think we'll whip that out. And as I went into the dermatologist's consulting room, they said, sit. So I sat. They didn't look up. They looked at their computer screen. They were finishing notes. They had a bit of a row with the nurse that was with them about something. I couldn't quite work out what. And eventually, after I'd been sat there 3 or 4 minutes, she sort of turned to me and looked at me and said, what? So well, it's just a little mole GP sent me, right? Yep, I think we'll take that out. Okay? And then, no warning, she went, there's a little side room. She goes, go in that room, strip to your pants. No word of a lie. I said, it was just. So I go in the room. She was a very scary woman. I stripped down to my pants. And she gave me the once-over. And I was great. In retrospect, I was grateful. She looked at all the moles on my body, checked. Anyway, she finished going over. When she finished going up and down every nook and cranny, she went, and walked out. And I went, can I get dressed now? Get dressed, sat down, made the appointment, and that. But it was, she was obviously incredibly competent. She did not put me at ease. Gentleness. Be gentle. Look at the context. The context of Paul's instruction is critical here, isn't it? That's why I got us to read 5:26. Because Paul says, look, let us not become conceited, provoking and envying each other. And then you get this instruction about how we restore. And then it's carry each other's burdens. Then in verse 3 is, if anyone thinks there's something when they're not, they deceive themselves. In other words, this sort of get a right understanding of who you are before you move to somebody else. Don't become conceited. Think about bearing burdens. Take a sober assessment of yourself. And when you do that, you will be gentle. Because you won't think of yourself as superior. You won't think of yourself as better. You won't be like, I'm coming here because I've got it all sorted out and I'm much better than you. No, we'll come in gentleness. We'll come seeking to restore. We'll come genuinely wanting the very best for that person and sort of adopting the manner that seeks that absolutely. Brothers and sisters, if someone's caught in a sin, you who live by the Spirit, restore that person gently. I think our whole kind of health, our witness as a church, our integrity, our effectiveness, people's eternity depends on us actually being able to do this and lean into this. Health and healing and restoration means that sometimes we have to move towards the pain. It's kind of, do we love each other enough to do this? It's most, I think, that the growth of the church, I don't mean numerical growth, I mean our growth as Christians, as a church family in years to come, depends on our willingness to look out for each other in this way. to take serious our responsibility, take serious our need, actually, for others to help me and helping each other, so that we're not kind of shallow and superficial, but we're seeking to love Jesus more and to make him known more where he's put us. It's that Sherpa, the Sherpa saw the danger. When he saw the danger the person was in, he had to act no matter how difficult that action was going to be. So it's the same for us. When we see one another adrift, ensnared, caught, we see the danger and we take seriously our responsibility to move towards it. Let me close by praying for us, that we'll be able to reflect well on this and do this sort of thing, and then Simon will lead us towards a conclusion. So the moment's quiet and then I'll pray. Our Father in heaven, we recognise that these are really difficult things. It's not at all easy as human beings to want to have sometimes difficult conversations with one another, but give us such hearts for one another, give us such love for your honour and glory, but also for one another's spiritual well-being, that we will watch out for each other. We will be in prayer for each other. We will sometimes even have those difficult conversations. Give us soft hearts to receive it when it comes our way. Give us courage to step into it when we sense your call to do so. And as we do, Lord, as you help us in this, would we grow as Christians in our love of you and our love of neighbour? Help us in all this by the power of your Spirit and for the glory of your name. Amen.